Everyone says trauma is something that needs to be healed, overcome, forgotten. But what if that view is only part of the story? What if trauma, instead of being a detour, is actually the hidden path to your expansion? There is a deep intelligence at work, even in the most painful experiences, an intelligence the mind often resists, but the higher consciousness recognizes as a calling. When something breaks you open from the inside, it feels like everything is lost: trust, direction, even your sense of self. But on the quantum level, collapse is not destruction. It's preparation for the rebirth of a more whole, more conscious, more present version of you. Just like the seed must crack open in the darkness to bloom, you too are being invited to journey through the soil of your own soul. What if what broke you is exactly what's realigning you with your essence? What if behind the pain there's a hidden code, not of punishment, but of purpose? Quantum physics teaches us that everything is energy in motion, and trauma, when observed with presence, begins to vibrate at a new frequency. It stops being a prison and becomes a passage. You don't need to erase your story. You don't need to force yourself to go back to normal. Because deep down, maybe you already knew that the old normal never fully embraced who you really were. Trauma may have pushed you out of the familiar, but it's in the unknown that real transformation happens. Today, you're going to look at your pain with new eyes, not to deny it, but to decode it. Because trauma is not the end of your journey. It may be the portal, the exact point where your soul chose to remember the power it always had. In the linear mind, trauma seems random, unfair, or meaningless. But on the quantum level, where everything is vibration and information, even pain carries its own intelligence. What you went through wasn't a chaotic collapse. It was a silent activation of parts of you that had been asleep. Each wound contains precise data about who you are becoming. It's hard to believe that when you're in the middle of the impact. Suffering feels like chaotic noise, no pattern, no message. But the field doesn't make mistakes. It organizes, attracts, mirrors. And trauma is one of those hard but precise ways of realigning your path when the ego clings to what no longer serves. What hurt the most, what disconnected you, may be exactly what reconnects you with your soul in a deeper way. Not because pain is necessary, but because when it's met with awareness, it becomes a catalyst for a new vibrational identity. Trauma forces you to move through layers you would never voluntarily touch. When you begin to look at what happened not as a mistake, but as a code, something opens. A new kind of listening, a new way of being with yourself. Pain stops being the enemy and becomes the teacher. Quantum physics teaches us, the act of observing changes the behavior of the particle. What is measured changes, and the same applies to trauma. When you observe it with judgment, fear, or resistance, it crystallizes as pain. But when you observe it with presence, compassion, and openness, it begins to reorganize. Trauma is not separate from you. It's a living part of your vibrational story, and it responds to the quality of your gaze. You can keep reliving it as punishment, or you can start to see it as an invitation for transformation. Everything depends on how you choose to witness it. This is a powerful key. Your gaze is an instrument of healing. You don't need to understand everything intellectually. You just need to hold presence. When you observe with the heart, not trying to fix, just to hold, the energetic field of trauma begins to shift. Looking at pain differently isn't denying what happened. It's giving the experience the chance to become something greater. You are not trapped in the story. You are standing before the opportunity to recreate its meaning. Many believe that healing means returning to who they were before the pain. But that's a misconception. Once consciousness expands, it never goes back to its original point. True healing doesn't rebuild the old. It inaugurates the new. Trauma moves through you like a rupture, but that rupture is not an ending. It is the beginning of an internal mutation. You are no longer the version you thought you were before the impact. Something was undone, so that something greater could emerge. The idea of going back to normal is the ego's desire, seeking safety in the familiar. But the soul has a different plan, to take you somewhere not only where the pain has meaning, but where your presence is more whole, more alive, more conscious. So healing is not a return, it is an ascension. It is allowing the version of you that was born from the trauma to fully exist, not by comparing yourself to who you once were, but by allowing yourself to be who you are now. Just as every seed needs darkness to germinate, trauma is a point of deep fertilization. Pain forces us to grow in directions we would never have chosen on our own. It breaks the surface of the old identity to release something more authentic. No one chooses to suffer, but once the impact happens, it can become fertile ground for expansion. Suffering is not the final destination. It's the pressure that activates a new path. And this path, when walked with awareness, reveals dormant gifts: courage, sensitivity, compassion. Trauma forces you out of autopilot. It makes you question what was once accepted. It pushes you to seek meaning where there was once only routine. It is the soil turned over, ready to receive the seed of a new vibrational identity. When you stop running from the pain and begin to listen to what it's trying to say, something shifts. The seed does break, but it is that very breaking that initiates birth. When something in you activated survival mode, it wasn't weakness, it was the system's wisdom. Freezing, fleeing, or fighting were neurobiological responses developed over millennia to preserve life. Your body didn't fail you. It did what it knew how to do to survive the unbearable. The way you learned to protect yourself, staying silent, hardening, distracting, may feel like a block today, but in its original context, it was the only possible way forward. It was your energy field reorganizing itself to keep your soul breathing inside the pain. These mechanisms aren't permanent. They were temporary solutions to extreme situations. When they are met with love, they no longer need to be repeated. By honoring your defenses with respect, you begin to dissolve the walls without destroying the foundation. What you survived shaped your sensitivity, your perception, even your compassion for others. Survival didn't disconnect you from your essence. It simply wrapped it in a protective layer that can now be gently removed with awareness and gratitude. Just as subatomic particles exist in multiple possibilities until they are observed, your responses to trauma also live in potential states. You can repeat the pain. You can go silent. You can transmute it. All of these paths are available, and your awareness is what collapses one of them. What defines your lived experience isn't only what happened, it's the way you view it now. Judging your past reactions with today's mind is unfair. What seemed like a choice was instinct. What seems like repetition is simply a program waiting to be released with new vibrational input. When you witness your story with compassion instead of criticism, you activate new responses within yourself. Your pain is not fixed. It is moldable, vibrational, and responds to the field of presence. Suffering crystallizes when viewed with resistance, but it dissolves in loving neutrality. Trauma is not a sentence. It is a possibility of superposition. You can collapse repetition, or you can collapse healing. Your consciousness holds that power. And it is in that moment your freedom becomes real, not by escaping the past, but by giving it a new meaning through the choice you make now. You don't carry only your own pain. There are ancestral stories, collective memories, and family echoes vibrating in your field. Quantum entanglement shows that particles that once interacted remain connected, even across vast distances. With trauma, the same principle applies. What you feel today may be an echo of something that began before you were born. The pain that pulses in your chest may be the unprocessed grief of your mother, a silenced grandfather, or entire generations who had no space to heal. And now, within you, the cycle finds the chance to end. Healing is not just a personal act. It's a gesture of liberation for an entire lineage. When you hold your pain with awareness, you send a wave of relief backward through time, dissolving invisible knots that kept your ancestry tied to repetition. Healing is non-linear. It expands far beyond you. So honor your journey, not as a burden, but as a sacred mission. You are not the victim of a broken story. You are the point of reconnection for many. The trauma that pulses in you is a collective cry for love, and your healing is the answer. In quantum physics, retrocausality is the possibility that future events can influence the past. And when we speak of healing, this concept becomes deeply symbolic. By transforming yourself today, you send new information to every version of who you've ever been. That frightened child, the confused teenager, the adult in collapse. They all receive a new frequency when you choose to stay present and loving in the now. The pain that once felt irreparable begins to make sense. The past doesn't change in facts, but it changes in energy. And that changes everything. Each conscious breath, each choice to stop punishing yourself, each inner embrace you offer to your yesterday self is a timeline collapse. You become your own guardian. The figure you once lacked is now born within you, with enough maturity and sensitivity to hold this new field. Healing, then, is not linear, it is circular. The relief you feel today reaches deep layers of your story and silently rewrites the emotional scripts that once felt inescapable. You become the point of reconnection between what hurt and what now blossoms. The greatest trap of pain is trying to get rid of it as quickly as possible. But all resistance reinforces the pattern. What you reject persists, and what you embrace transforms. Trauma begins to dissolve not when you deny it, but when you learn to be with it, without judgment, without running, without haste. Presence holds a silent power. It disarms the defense systems that keep suffering active. When you allow yourself to feel, without dramatizing, without labeling, without demanding immediate meaning, something inside you shifts. The body relaxes, the frequency rises, the field begins to reorganize. This surrender is not passive or resigned. It is active, alive, loving. You're not giving in to trauma, you're allowing it to reveal what needs to be seen with new eyes. And often this simple gesture of presence is already the beginning of the deepest release. Being present with your pain is an act of quantum courage. It is stepping out of the need to fix and into the field of conscious observation. And in that space, where there is no urgency, trauma ceases to be a prison and becomes a portal, a point of transition between who you were and who you are becoming. Every initiation begins with a fall, a loss, a break, a crisis. The ground disappears and you no longer know who you are. In that void, the soul receives its deepest invitation, to remember who it has always been, even when everything external seems to vanish. Trauma is this initiatory fall. It breaks structures, challenges certainties, and forces the soul to turn inward. But what emerges on the other side is not someone broken, it is someone awakened. Pain purifies. It reveals layers of your being that had fallen asleep beneath routine and old identity. Every trauma carries a hidden gift, more self-love, more compassion, more clarity of purpose. But that gift only reveals itself when you stop fighting the pain and start listening to it. It didn't come to punish you. It came to remind you of the spiritual strength that lives in you, beyond all stories and scars. When you move through trauma with consciousness, you don't just heal, you rise. You become a mirror for others, an anchor for the collective, a lighthouse for those still in the fall. And in this way, what once hurt you becomes your greatest gift. The living reminder that you were never separate from the source. Trauma is not what happened to you. It's what moves through you, like a raw, intense current of energy that needs consciousness to transform into wisdom. When you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to awaken in me?" something within you aligns with the quantum field of healing. You are not the label of your pain, nor the memories that wounded you. You are the consciousness that observes, feels, and transforms. And every time you choose to embrace instead of resist, breathe instead of repress, love instead of harden, you're not only rewriting your story, you're changing the frequency of the entire human collective. Healing doesn't mean erasing the past, it means integrating it with wisdom. Trauma is not a flaw in your path, it is the path taking a more radical form to awaken you. Because sometimes, the soul needs to be stripped of all that is false, to remember what is essential. Now write in the comments, "I am the consciousness untouched by experience." This is not just a sentence, it's a vibration, a silent message to the quantum field, saying, "I remember." You are not broken, you are expanding, and the more you embrace yourself, the more the world around you finds space to heal too.